Hi, in this part of the video, we will look at the DP201 real exam questions. We will solve these questions, we will look at the options, and we will also clarify our concepts during this video. This is just the part one. There will be a full playlist put in future, which will have a series of videos. Going through those videos will help you clear DP201 exam. The DP201 is related to designing an Azure data solution. The cost of the exam is 165 US dollars, and the language supported are English, Japanese, Chinese, Korean. If you see this, what are the skills they measure? They test your knowledge on Azure data storage solutions. That's 40 to 45% of the questions. Design data processing solutions. That's 25 to 30% of the questions, and design for data security and compliance. That is 25 to 30% of the questions. Now, who should appear for this exam? People who are coming from a data analysis and data background, some ETL background or database background, they will find it relatively easier, and they will be able to relate with this exam. But this is still not limited only to such individuals. People who are starting off their career or they are in the initial stages of their career, they can also appear for this exam. So in this case, this list is not exhaustive, but as and when Azure keeps some of the features in the preview, the moment they decide from preview they want to do a hard launch, they would put it in the general availability and make it available in the exam also. Now let's look into the details of each and every section. So the first one is the design Azure data storage solutions. This you will see 40 to 45% of the questions which is coming from this topic. Now, in this topic, what is required? As a part of the requirement, you are tested on your data storage solution skills, which includes both non-relational cloud data stores and relational cloud data stores. Under non-relational cloud data stores, what you see is tools like Cosmos DB, Data Lake Storage, Blob Storage, and under relational, you will see tools like Azure Synapse Analytics, and you will also see some portion of SQL as well. So, what are the key elements? Design for high availability, designing for disaster recovery strategy, data distribution and partitions. This is what you mostly see, and design for scale. So this can, if you go to the details, you can also see some elements around data. Sorry, on the storage account overview, what are different types of storage accounts available, like file storage accounts, blob storage accounts, block storage accounts, general purpose accounts, etc. And then you can refer to the Microsoft documentation. What I would recommend is go through uh, the videos that I'm uploading, as well as read these links. You can search on Google, or you may refer to my videos where I'm also posting what links I'm referring, and that will help you prepare for this exam. So these storage types are important. Now you will see a lot of questions on Cosmos DB as well. Cosmos DB is similar to DynamoDB or DocumentDB in AWS, Amazon Web Services. So here you can see you can use Cosmos DB for your Gremlin APIs, which is primarily used for graph databases, where you are trying to build some relations between the nodes and the data objects. And this is purely NoSQL database. Okay, and there are different purposes. So this is providing 99.999% availability, and it is fully managed and very cost effective. You can then see relational cloud data source like Azure Synapse Analytics. So this is primarily used for limitless analytics service. You can also build your data warehouse on this. Okay, and this is a very important database of Azure. This is similar to Redshift in AWS. So what it does is it provides you limitless scale. There is no limit to it. Okay, you don't have to do a robust planning that my database will be of this size. It is limitless. It has very powerful insights. You can expand the discovery of insights from all your data and apply machine learning models also for intelligent apps. You get a unified experience, end-to-end analytics solutions, unmatched security, is highly secured, and has column and row level security and dynamic data masking as well. And you get very instant clarity on your business with the freshest data possible. You can then see disaster recovery strategy. This is an important topic. So under disaster recovery, you see these topics. How can Azure help you to protect your critical data and applications? And then you have various backup and disaster recovery that you can trust. So- and you can learn more about Azure backup, site recovery, archiving, storage, and etc. So primarily what we do for disaster recovery is we can have a backup solution for on-premises applications and data on cloud, enterprise scale disaster recovery. This is one of the important topics, and small and mid-sized business disaster recovery with with Azure site recovery. Then we did delve into depth about the enterprise scale disaster recovery, how it is done, what is the architecture, what are the different components, etc. You also need to understand backup of on-premises applications and data on cloud. It is very important. If we understand the architecture, how it is done, what are the different backup components, etc. Then we have to design for high availability. This is a topic also on which we will be tested. So in here you will be tested for high availability. That means you are building solutions for high availability using AZs. You need to understand what are the regions and AZs concepts and how do you do a multi-AZ deployment, multi-region deployment, and delivering reliability in Azure. How do you do that? How do you make your application resilient? Okay, and zonal versus zone redundant architecture. So using the zonal architecture, you will understand the concept of how to do a multi-AZ deployment, and then you also understand the summary of zonal and zone redundant Azure services, different SLAs offered by the AZs. Then in the design data processing solutions, this comprises 25 to 30% of the questions. So what is covered here is batch processing solutions using Data Factory and Azure Databricks. As you see, Azure Data Factory is the cloud-based ETL. It's a ETL product from Azure. You can build complex hybrid, extract, transform load, or ELT solutions and data integration projects. Now you can connect it to various databases. You can connect it to HD Insight. You can connect it to Synapse Analytics, and you basically create data-driven workflows for orchestrating data movement and transforming data at scale. You can connect it with Databricks and SQL databases or HD Insight Hadoop as well. At a high level, we connect and collect data, transform and enrich, CI/CD and publish, monitor. So this is what we do using Data Factory. Now let's look at the Databricks. So Databricks is basically a Apache Spark platform. You can set up this, majorly used for data science, and it supports Python, Scala, R, Java, and you can use libraries which includes TensorFlow, PyTorch, Scikit-learn. So these are data science based libraries. So one thing to note is they also test your knowledge to understand where processing of data will take place, at source or at destination or in transit. Then they also ask questions around real-time processing solutions. Now in here, stream analytics is a key and Databricks. Now in this, if you see stream analytics, this is a real-time analytics and complex event processing engine. What it does is if you have high volumes of fast streaming data, you can it will process it. And at a high level, main use cases is if you are having data coming from IoT devices, from web logs or click stream, number of clicks made on the website, that's a click stream. Or for geospatial analytics for fleet management, driverless vehicles, or for predictive maintenance of your high value assets. These are the use cases where stream analytics is used. Now, then you have data security and compliance. So in this, there are two areas. One is source data access. So suppose your data is in a database and you want to access it. What are the secure endpoints that can be used both in public and private cloud? And what are the authentication mechanisms such as access keys, shard access signatures, Active Directory that can be utilized. Then the second portion of data security, you have data policies and standards. So designs data encryption for rest and in transit, data masking, auditing, data privacy, your archiving strategy, and your plan to purge the data based on the business requirements. The Azure has backup and archiving solutions. You can build your strategy using these solutions. So these are the clients who use Azure backup strategy and solutions drastically. So whenever we talk about backup strategy, we always want to increase storage capacity and reduce the cost, because this data will not be accessed frequently, but you want to retain it for a compliance period. For example, some clients retain it for 7 years. So if you have to retain it for 7 years, you don't want to spend a lot of money. You want to reduce your cost and you want more storage. So it's a hassle-free data archiving because you don't have to manage space on expensive purpose-built backup storage systems. You don't have to get your tape drives and plug it to TSM and then take the backups, etc. You don't have to do that. This is easily built into the cloud solution. So what it does is you meet your compliance goals with the backup and archiving strategy. So if you have to get the Azure Data Engineer Associate certificate, you will have to clear both DP200 and DP201. These both exams you have to clear. So what is the difference? One takes care of your Azure data solution. The second takes care of designing an Azure data solution. Together, using these two, you achieve your associate certification in Azure Data Engineer Associate. Now, how can you prepare for these certifications? There are two ways. There are free online courses and there are instructor-led paid courses. So if you see here, these are all free online paid courses. You can go through this. You do not need to register into Udemy or anything. In Udemy, I saw there are very less courses on these DP 200 and 201. Hardly one or two I could find. So you can go through this to gain knowledge, and you can browse through the websites, like such websites to clarify the concepts, etc. This is very useful. And if you don't have ample of time to do that, go through my videos. Each and every questions will have a detailed explanation of each and every option, and I'll cover the concepts as well. So when you go for the exam, it's like you are going through some dumps, but you are going in a very cognitive manner where you clearly understand each and every concept. So how much time does it take to prepare for DP201? What I would recommend is 3 hours per day, 15 days. Overall, you have to prepare for 15 days, and 15 into 3, total duration is 45 hours of preparation. The alternate choice you have is to go through the 15 hours video list in this channel. So I'm going to upload a series of videos and I'm going to loop them in a playlist so that it is easy for all of you to go through the important topics, the questions. Basically, I'll be covering the questions because I'm very much exam focused. Concepts, pure concepts will not help. It's the preparation which is structured around the way the certification tests you that is important. So I'll be covering both the questions as well as how you can tackle those answers using the concepts. Please like my videos because that helps me with uploading more information related videos. I assure you, going through my videos will help you clear these certification exams. I'm providing everything free of cost. Please subscribe my channel. It's a sincere request. Please subscribe my channel because uh, it really keeps me motivated to put more such videos which will help you clear the certification exams. Now let's straight away jump into the real exam questions and how do we tackle each and every option. I'll show you how to do that. Now a lot of you may be already experts at doing this and they already have these concepts, so they might find it repetitive. But if there are a lot of people who do not understand the concepts and are here to clear this exam, this video is specifically designed for you. So it doesn't matter if you have cloud experience or not. If you have some basic database knowledge, that will also help, because this exam is primarily based around database and ETL. But eventually you will, with the concepts that we'll cover in this video, you will be able to understand it. If you are starting a career in IT, this will help you as well, and it will be easy for you to understand. But if there are people who are already into IT but into different stream and want to try their hands in data, this will also help them. Needless to say, people who are database experts and ETL experts, this will definitely help them elevate their career. Let's see at the first question. You are designing an SD cluster, Hadoop cluster, okay? And that it is using Azure Data Lake Gen 1 storage. Now the solution requires POSIX permissions and enables diagnostic logging for auditing. So you need to recommend solutions that optimize storage. So what is the proposed solution that the question suggests? The proposed solution is ensure that the files stored are larger than 250 MB. Does this meet your goal? Now let's break these questions. First, try to understand what are the keywords. So I see two keywords here. One is this Azure Data Lake Gen 1 storage, and the second is you need to recommend solution that optimize storage. So this question is about storage optimization, and the storage that is being used here is your Azure Data Lake Gen 1 storage. Now, what is the keyword in the answer? The proposed solution, it is larger than, file should be stored larger than 250 MB. This is the proposed solution. Now, what is HD Insight? It is a cost-effective enterprise grade service for open source analytics. So use cases primarily big data storage, machine learning, analysis for machine learning, because machine learning programs has to go through big data clusters. So and then Apache Kafka, that is real time data streaming. So these are the products. This is what comes with HD Insight. You have Hadoop, which is majorly used for large data storage, big data storage, and you have Hive LLAP, which is used for interactive fast queries on such large data sets which are structured, non-structured. Okay, machine learning, it can go through those large data sets and analyze, perform analysis. Okay, and Kafka is for real-time streaming of data. So now, if you want to create batch programs like a ETL, you can use these tools. If you want to write fast interactive SQLs, you can use these tools. If you want to query unstructured data sets using NoSQL, you can use this. If you want to stream like real-time streaming of data, something like a message broker or middleware services, you have Kafka, Storm, and Spark. If you want to apply machine learning, you have MLlibs and so on. So let's take this diagram as an example where ETL is being performed. So these are your source systems. Data Factory. Data Factory is the ETL tool, cloud-based ETL tool of Azure. It gets the data, stores it in lake storage in files, and then Spark stores that data, transforms, does some transformation and stores that data in HD Insight. Now that's our question. It is saying you are designing a Hadoop cluster that uses data lake Gen 1 storage. That's our question. So you have HD Insight here, which uses data lake storage. Now, what are POSIX permissions? POSIX permissions, if you see, are standards majorly used in Unix to uh, pro provide permissions. It has a permission structure for accessing files and folders. What our question is doing is it requires POSIX permissions and enable diagnostic logging for auditing. So here, what I get from this question is this guy SD Insight needs POSIX permissions on data lake storage to read the files. So if you see here, when you have to do that, no, your if your file size is greater than 250 MB, it ensures lesser number of read requests. This guy is wanting to read the storage, and then there is lesser number of read requests, and that way it is more optimized. When we talk about optimization from a storage, it means read write, because storage optimization, these are infinite. These devices have infinite storage. Cloud is meant for infinite storage. Okay, but storing the files which are greater than 250 MB, this will ensure that there is some sort of good structure maintained when you are storing the data, and the number of reads will be less. Hence, this option is correct. So we will go ahead with yes. So yes is our answer. Let's move to the next question. So same question, but you have Azure Data Lake. I mean, that's it's the same question. The keywords are the same. The only change is the proposed solution. So the keyword in the proposed solution is combine small files into larger files. And does this meet the goal? Yes, this does meet the goal because if there are files which are smaller, at least smaller than 250 MB, you have to merge and make it larger. That will optimize your storage. That means it will optimize your reads. Number of reads will be less. So this should be the correct answer. Yes, should be correct. We can use the same explanation we used for the previous question. 250 MB plus is desired. So let's look a similar question, same question but a different solution. So it says ensure that files stored are smaller than 250 MB to optimize storage. This is wrong. The answer is no. It doesn't meet the goal. Files should be more than 250 MB. If it is less than 250 MB, merge multiple files so that it becomes more than 250 MB. Why? Because you want to reduce the number of reads, the number of file reads. That will be better from a optimization standpoint. So now let's move to the next question. Please read this question. It says you are designing an Azure SQL database that will use elastic pools. What are elastic pools? So suppose this is your SQL database. Elastic pool will have a lot of similar databases. Why is elastic pools used? It is used with Azure SQL database, and the reason is simple, cost-effective solution for managing and scaling. Basically, lot of database bases if you have one for different purpose. Suppose one database for each department, and you have big scaling requirements, and you have very unpredictable usage demands. Then you can use elastic pools. See, if you didn't have elastic pools, what you would do in the traditional on-premises infrastructure, you would over provision resources, just overestimating your peak usage, or you would under provision, and during Christmas time the loads and database will crash. Okay, so coming back to the question, now it's yes, you're designing a SQL database that use elastic pools. Okay, you plan to store data about customers in a table. Each record uses a value for customer ID. That means customer ID is unique. Okay, you have a database, you have a table, and you have a field where customer ID is unique. You need to recommend a strategy to partition data based on values in customer ID. That means partitioning, you have to do it based on customer ID. Okay, so let's look at what are the partitioning options first. See, when you want to partition, you have these options: horizontal partition, vertical partition, and functional partition. First, why, what is partition? Why do you do partition? Because suppose you want to store all the data for a region, for example North America, in one database, and all data for Europe in another database. You, or instead of putting into different databases, you can partition your database or partition your tables, etc. So the this is the advantage: improve scalability, improve performance, improve security, improve operational flexibility. So scalability is today, you know you want to scale for higher volumes, more customers, you can scale, and your search will still be efficient. Your search will not uh, get impacted. So it can improve performance also. So how it will improve? Because your data access operations, it will run on each partition. It will take a subset of data from each partition. That's how performance will improve. Now security, how does it improve? Is you can maintain different sensitive, non-sensitive data in different partitions. Okay, you can maintain SSN numbers. You can maintain passport numbers in one partition. You can maintain uh, some other data, like web sentiment data, which is non-sensitive, but in another partition. Now types of partition, we have horizontal, vertical, functional. Let's look with the diagram. So take this example in horizontal. What it does is you have one table like that. Okay, it will create two shards. The partition in horizontal partition is called shards. It will create two shards where it will remove this data. So these three records comes in this shard, A to G, and H to Z will come. This three rows will get into this shard. This is horizontal partitioning. So basically, this is in Oracle world. If you have worked, there was something called range partition. This is a way of creating a range partition. A to Z here, H to Z in another partition. It is called shard. See, vertical partition. This is vertical partition. Here, what happens is they split the columns. For example, key name, description, price. They've put in one partition. And the other columns like key, stock, and last orders they've put in another partition. And there will be a common key so that you can join and you can get a compound data if you need it. Functional partitioning is like you create one partition for HR data, you create another partition for your employee data. It's similar to that. So here in this case, what they have done is they have two set of data. Okay, there is a corporate data domain and customer data. So they have kept this set of data in one partition, this set of data in another partition. So just to explain it better, functional partitioning, if like suppose you have a e-commerce system, you store the invoice data in one partition and product inventory data in another partition. So you're storing the invoice data, suppose this is invoice data, in one partition and product inventory data in another partition. So if you see this proposed solution, see, the question is asking you to provide a strategy to partition the data based on the values in customer ID. And the solution says separate the data into customer regions by using vertical partitioning. Okay, so will it serve the purpose? See here, what we should do is the proposed solution saying is separate the data into customer regions by using vertical partitioning. So when you are using elastic pools, okay, please remember this: elastic pools whenever you are building and your requirement is, in this case, for example, you are just storing customers is identifying it uniquely. So it's always better to use horizontal partition because you will have the whole set of records. Uh, whole set of records. Like here, you see you have entire record here. Number of records is split, but the partition, the shard, is holding the entire record. But in vertical partitioning, it has split the number of columns. So then, in order to access the entire record, you will have to join this and this partition, which is not performance efficient. Hence, our answer would be no. Okay, another thing is you never put into customer regions. Regions are like one guy is in North America, one guy is in uh, one user is in Europe. You never separate it and put into a vertical partition in a region. You never do that. That is strictly a no-no. Now let's look at this same question, but the proposed solution is different. If you see the proposed solution, it says separate the data into customer regions. See, we have to separate the data into shards or partitions, not regions, not zones. Okay, by using horizontal partitioning. So this answer is also wrong. The answer is no. Now let's look at same question but a different proposed solution. It says separate data into shards. Yes, we should do that by using horizontal partitioning. Perfect. Because we never create regions, we create shards or partitions whenever we partition. So the answer would be yes. This is the right answer. So let's look at this question. You are designing an Azure Databricks interactive cluster. What is an interactive cluster? Where you can plug notebooks and fire queries, etc., for your analysis. It is interactive in nature, primarily with the intention of analysis. So basically, this cluster will be used infrequently and will be configured for auto termination. That is, so you need to ensure that the cluster configuration is retained indefinitely after the cluster is terminated. The solution should minimize the cost. So basically, the requirement states is cluster configuration is retained indefinitely. Even after the cluster is terminated, the solution should minimize cost. Let's look at the options. Option A suggests clone the cluster after it is terminated. So if a cluster is terminated and the cloning will not work. The cluster got terminated. The cloning can work before the cluster is terminated, but that is not cost effective, because even if you clone it before the cluster gets terminated, another copy of cluster will still be running, and it will be not productive from a cost perspective. Then B says terminate the cluster manually when processing completes. So manual termination is not needed because you have already configured it for auto termination. So manual configuration is not needed. C states create an Azure runbook that starts the cluster every 90 days. This is not a cost productive thing, because if you start the cluster every 90 days, there may not be a use and the cluster will be lying idle. Pinning the cluster looks correct. Let's look at pin the cluster. Before that, quickly look at auto termination. What is auto termination? So if you see here, automatic termination, you can, when you create a cluster, you can set the auto termination parameter so that the cluster will automatically terminate at a particular time, and you will save your cost. So if there is an inactivity period in minutes, you can set that minutes, and the cluster will terminate automatically. Pinning the cluster, what it does is 30 days after the cluster is terminated, it is permanently deleted. To keep all purpose cluster configuration even after the cluster has terminated for more than 30 days, administrator can pin the cluster. Up to 20 clusters can be pinned. Now, cloning a cluster can be only done if there is an existing cluster. You see this, there is an existing cluster. You cannot clone the cluster after it is deleted. So automatic termination, you can set this parameter, terminate after 120 minutes of inactivity. So whatever the number of minutes you have set up, it will auto terminate after that. Now auto termination, this depends upon whether it's a standard cluster, then you can set auto terminate automatically after 120 minutes. But if it is a high concurrency cluster, you cannot do a terminate automatically. For high concurrency clusters, automatic termination is not possible. So the correct answer here is option D, pin the cluster. So the key to solving the questions is you should first understand what are the keywords and what is the problem statement. The one in blue is the problem statement here. So this is a question: a company plans to use a Spark Analytics to analyze the intrusion detection. So you need to recommend a solution to monitor network and system activities for malicious activities and policy violations. Reports must be produced in an electronic format and sent to management. The solution must minimize administrative efforts. So these are the options. So there are two things: Apache Spark Analytics. So if you see Apache Spark Analytics, only two tools can do it: C&D, Azure Databricks, and SG Insights. So that's how you remove the first two options, because Data Factory is an ETL and Data Lake is a big comprehensive storage platform. So you can do Spark Analytics using SG Insight and Databricks. So if you see this Databricks, collaborative Apache Spark based analytics service. And if you see SG Insight, it is an enterprise grade service for open source analytics. Now let's see what is the difference. In the question, if you see, they're asking to create a solution to monitor the network. So monitoring, actually SG Insight is capable of monitoring. They have services for monitoring, but Databricks does not have that. So if you see this SG Insight, it has monitoring capabilities. So SG Insight integrates with Azure Log Analytics to provide single interface where you can monitor all your clusters. This is possible. And if you see Databricks, it says you do not need, there is no need for monitoring, because clusters are set, configured, and fine-tuned to ensure reliability and performance. There is no need for monitoring. So when you do Spark Analytics, you can use this Spark, and you can use Kafka for real-time integration of monitoring data, and Apache Storm as well. Okay, and the analysis can be done using Apache Hive LL AP, where you can fire a very fast queries and do your analysis. And you can also plug reporting tools to this application and create reports. Both Databricks and SG Insight do not have reporting capabilities, but reports can be plugged to this. Power BI can be plugged to these two platforms. So in this case, option D, Azure SG Insight, is the right option. This brings us towards the end of this video. If you like my video, please hit like and subscribe my channel. Subscribing my channel and liking my videos helps me to put up more such useful content. My mission is that I share all my knowledge and analysis techniques to clear the certification exams with all of you. Liking and subscribing to my channel will help me keep motivated and continuously share the information. A piece of motivational advice: please work such that you outwork everyone. That is the only mantra to clear all these certifications. Be highly motivated. This certification DP 200 and 201 requires lots and lots of motivations, lots of memory retention, understanding the concepts. So you have to keep yourself motivated and healthy and try to outwork everyone.